It is now my privilege to introduce to you our most distinguished guest. Most Reverend Desmond M. Tutu is the Archbishop of Cape Town. He is the highest official of the South African Anglican Church, in which body he was ordained a priest in 1961. The Archbishop is, as you know, the leader of the anti-Apartheid movement in South Africa. He also is Chancellor of the University of the Western Cape in Cape Town. In June of this year, he was elected to the Board of Overseers of Harvard University. He is, as you know, the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. In addition, he has received the Martin Luther King Jr. Humanitarian Award in 1984, the Martin Luther King Jr. Peace Award in 1986, and the Albert Schweitzer Humanitarian Award from Emmanuel College of Oxford in 1988. He is a beloved and admired soldier of peace in today's world. I am honored to present to you the Most Reverend Desmond M. Tutu.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, friends, thank you very much for the privilege of being able to speak with you this morning. It is great to be here. I bring you the greetings of your sisters and brothers in South Africa. Often when you listen to how you are introduced at meetings and so forth, it's useful to remember that at home they have all kinds of graffiti. One of them has it in Cape Town, God loves Alan Busak and Tutu, which is nice. But then somebody adds at the bottom, the gods must be mad. It's a very great privilege to go around on behalf of our people. And when one listens to the things that get to be said, and when one receives honors, one has to remember, or certainly I have to remember, that all of this really happens to me in a representative capacity. But it is for real that when you stand out in a crowd, it is only because you are being carried on the shoulders of others, tremendous people who have made incredible sacrifices for the struggle. I know that I can say this without being presumptuous, that in this regard alone, I speak on behalf of millions when I want to say thank you. Thank you to this university. Thank you to you, the students and the faculty of this university, for your tremendous support of our struggle for a new kind of South Africa. Thank you for your SHARE program, which enables Black South African students and faculty to benefit from the quite outstanding facilities available here at Penn State. And we want to salute you as well for your divestment policy. Thank you. Now, of course, I mean, those sound so utterly inadequate. But so it has to be. For human language, as you know, dear friends, must always come short of the reality that it tries to describe. You know, I mean, when you want to speak about, say, a Beethoven symphony that has moved you, ultimately you just end up lamely saying, well, it is beautiful. And even when you want to speak about your beloved, the one who, when you touch her or she touches you or you touch her, you get electric tingles going down your spine. How do you actually get people to savor what he means to you, what she means to you, what that touch means? And you probably end up by saying, well, she is beautiful, he's beautiful, he's a great guy. But do know that if it was possible to open our hearts, and if you had the technology to be able to study that kind of thing, if that is where it was situated, you'd be able to discover the depth of our gratitude and our appreciation and our thanks for all of what you mean to us. For your share is one that helps to increase the morale of the victims of apartheid and those opposed to apartheid, and it helps to reduce the cockiness of those who perpetrate apartheid. I hope that your university will also be able to participate in another program, the Bishop Tutu Refugee Scholarship Fund, for those of our young people who have left South Africa and cannot at the present time return. They want to go back home to a post-apartheid South Africa, return home as highly qualified as possible. Just a few thoughts. You know that there are probably 3 ways in which you change a government that you do not like. The normal way, the one that is used in most democratic societies, is through the power of the ballot box, when you vote this government in because of the wonderful promises they make, or you vote them out because they have not lived up to their promises. Now that method is totally excluded for us blacks in South Africa. We do not vote because we cannot vote. Even in the newest constitution of that country, 1984 model, 73% of the population of South Africa is totally excluded from any meaningful participation in the decision-making process of that country. And I often say, here I am before you, Archbishop of our church in South Africa, a Nobel laureate, 58 years of age, in the land of my birth. I do not vote because I cannot vote. Whereas an 18-year-old, because she is white, and more recently so-called colored or Indian, can vote. And so for us, who would want to change the iniquitous system of apartheid in the way that most people would want to do so non-violently, the route of using the power of the ballot box is excluded for us. The other method of getting rid of a government is through the violent overthrow of the government through a coup, as nearly seemed to have happened in Manila. And most of us would say, no, we do not want to use violence. So then we are left with only one other option, the non-violent option. Now, I want you to know, dear friends, something, or maybe let me merely mention things that I believe you know about. That our people, since 1912, have sought to change the racist system of South Africa non-violently. They have used the conventional methods of demonstrations, of petitions, of delegations going to speak with government officials, seeking to make them aware of the plight of blacks and hoping that they would understand that all we blacks want is what they have always wanted for themselves as well: a share in the land of our birth, a place in the sun. Now, you know what has happened. The response of the apartheid system to non-violent protest. Well, you remember in 1960, when our people were protesting peacefully against the past laws, Sharpeville happened, and Langa. Sharpeville, when 69 people were killed, and most of them were shot in the back, running away. And then, you recall too, don't you, how our young high school students saying, we have had enough, but we will protest against this travesty of an education that is being provided for blacks, which everyone knows is an inferior commodity. We'll protest against it by singing and waving placards in the streets. And of course, June the 16th happened in 1976, when our children were arrested, our children were killed, our children went into exile, so that even now, there are many in many parts of the world whose parents do not know where they are. Our people are peace-loving to a fault. The African National Congress, our liberation movements, have really been those that have been committed to a non-violent changing of the South African system. After all, you don't give Nobel Peace Prizes to people who are committed to violence. And one President General of the ANC, Albert Luthuli, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. It was in 1960 when our political organizations were banned. And reluctantly, those organizations said, we will have to opt for the armed struggle. Now, we wanted to change the system and said we want to find non-violent strategies. Now, when you get up in South Africa and you say, I want to oppose apartheid and to get rid of it non-violently, well, you are everybody's blue-eyed boy. I mean, if you can imagine me being blue-eyed, but I mean, because as long as you suggest methods that everybody knows don't stand a snowball's chance in hell of succeeding, then that's okay. But the minute you suggest methods that are actually going to bring about the kind of change that everybody says, we want the change, then why you change into an ogre? You discover that everybody wants change, it seems, as long as things remain the same. And so we suggest, how about sanctions? How about sanctions which should be a pressure on the South African government to push them to the negotiating table as a non-violent strategy? And have you heard the wonderful responses that you get? No, sanctions. No, you can't use sanctions because, and this is what they say, because sanctions hurt blacks. Oh, really? They say, no, you hurt the ones you want most of all to help. Now we are very, very touched with this newfound altruism. Because the same people have been benefiting from black misery that comes from our people providing cheap labor. Our people being the ones whose family life has had to be destroyed by the migratory labor system. And you didn't get a squeak out of those people about what apartheid was doing. They tell you about the possible suffering of blacks, and you say to them, but man, hey, apartheid is making us suffer now. We're not talking about something that is going to happen in the future. And we say, it's incredible. I mean, you listen to people say, sanctions, no. And then the same people, without compunction, apply sanctions at the drop of a hat on Nicaragua. They apply sanctions on Libya. They apply sanctions left, right, and center. I don't hear everything, I don't know everything, obviously. But I haven't heard them say, now will these sanctions hurt the people who are trying to help? But when the question of South Africa comes up, and then suddenly they've got this extraordinary caring for blacks. And we say, we are touched. But can you tell us, if you do not have the vote, and if you do not want to use violence, how do you change this system? It won't change by appeals. How many appeals have been made to the South African government? The Reagan administration surpassed itself with its constructive engagement policy. And during that period, some of the worst excesses of apartheid happened. And then they say, sanctions don't work. Really? Now, why worry about something that doesn't work? Why apply it to Cuba? Why do you apply it? I mean, even now, as we speak, you hear governments in the West say to the countries of the Eastern Bloc, if you make progress towards democratizing your society, then we will give you aid. Now, if that is not sanctions, what is? But why, dear friends, when it comes to black people? Now, I'm not suggesting that we are dealing with racists in the West. I'm only saying that it is an extraordinary kind of coincidence. And I have to tell you, for something that doesn't work, sanctions have been extremely effective. The South African government would not have left Angola. The South African government would not have agreed to help in the implementation of Resolution 435, bringing about the independence of Namibia, had it not been for sanctions. The South African government would not have stopped fighting. It stopped fighting because it could not any longer afford fighting. And so, friends, we say to you, South Africa is our country. We don't want to see it destroyed. We want that country for all of us, black and white. And we are concerned that we will have a country that has not suffered from a scorched earth policy. Now, we live in heady times in South Africa. We have marches left, right, and center. They've decided that I'm no longer the Archbishop of Cape Town. They say I'm the Archbishop of Cape Town. Mr. de Klerk is actually quite a nice guy. I mean, he smiles more often than his predecessor used to. He doesn't wag his finger at you. And I think we've got to give him credit for some of the things that he has done. He has certainly done something that was quite extraordinary and noteworthy in the release of 8 of our political leaders. And he has allowed those marches to happen, which have been a tremendous, tremendous assertion of our people's determination, dignified and disciplined, to overturn apartheid and to bring about this new South Africa, this non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa. We should commend Mr. de Klerk. But what he has done does not justify the universal euphoria that there is around already. Because it seems what he is doing is responding in an ad hoc fashion to local and to international pressure. He is a politician. Now, most politicians I know are in the business of gaining political power and having gained that power to retain it. And Mr. de Klerk is not a different kind of political animal and will do the least possible to satisfy the international community that will enable him to retain power and privilege in the hands of the white minority. And you see, the international community is too apt to be pleased too easily. And the reason is, you see, if they can show that apartheid is actually changing, then they won't have to apply measures that might, for their domestic constituency, prove unpopular. You see, we still have a state of emergency. We still have severe clamps on the media. We still have detention without trial, including the detention of young children. That is still happening. And you see, friends, we are not in the business of making apartheid slightly more comfortable. We are not in the business of having apartheid reformed. You don't reform a Frankenstein. You destroy a Frankenstein. We don't want, as somebody said, we don't want our chains made slightly more comfortable. We want those chains removed. And we want them removed for the sake of all South Africans, black and white. Because you see, white South Africans have not yet discovered, many of them, that you can't have sectional freedom. They find that they have to spend so much time protecting their little freedoms that they have very little time left over to enjoy them. And we say to them, there's no way in which you are going to be free, truly free, apart from us. And we don't want to drive white people into the sea. It's incredible. I've been meeting with some of these men who were in jail for 23, 24, 25 years, the Walter Sisulus. And you would have thought that they would come out of jail wracked with bitterness. It's incredible. I mean, when you sit in their presence, you are moved nearly to tears by how gentle and bitter they are. How deeply committed they are to the true liberation of South Africa. How they want a South Africa that is going to belong to all of its people. A South Africa where all of us will be able to share. And it's incredible really, how our people are truly committed to a non-racial South Africa. Now, you may have seen descriptions of that massive rally in Soweto when they were welcoming our leaders back. 80,000 people packed into the stadium. And they say, and I was told this by a young white South African who said, the one thing that moved him deeply was seeing 5 Afrikaners carrying a banner. And they were saying their society is a society, Afrikaners for democracy. And coming into this stadium, chock-a-block full mainly of blacks, and these white Afrikaners who belong to the tribe that our people would say have been our oppressors. And as they were coming into the stadium, they were led in by some of our young chaps, toy-toying, dancing in front of them. We have an incredible country. We really have a truly great country that is going to become even more great when we are free. It is, you know, in one of the marches, when they were still not permitted, people were sprayed with purple dye. And there are many wags, you know, in these places. And so you got T-shirts coming out which had emblazoned on them, "The purple shall rule." But I said, no. They were trying to make us one color, purple. No, God made us different. And so on our historic march in Cape Town, I said to the crowd, and it was a crowd that was made up of all the people of South Africa, representing all the races of South Africa. I said, hold hands. Hold hands. And they held hands, and I said, look at your hands. And you found a black hand clasping a white hand. And I said, no, we're not the purple people. We are the rainbow people, the new people of South Africa. And I said, our movement is unstoppable. We are going to be free, all of us, black and white together. You remember that wonderful film, The Defiant Ones, of two escaped convicts manacled together. They happened to be one black and the other white. They fell into a ditch with slippery sides. And the one convict clawed his way nearly to the top. He couldn't get out because he was still manacled to his friend at the bottom. And so he slid down to the bottom. The only way they could make it, the only way they could get out, is if they said, up, 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 up together. And we too in South Africa have to say, there is no way in which we can survive except together, black and white. There is no way in which we can be human except together, black and white. There is no way in which we will ultimately be free except together, black and white. And we want to invite you, come and celebrate our freedom, black and white together. Thank you.
Archbishop Tutu, we thank you more than we can tell you for making this such a memorable day at Penn State and for sharing with us your vision of a better world for all. Your presence here today has contributed indeed to one of the most memorable days in the history of this university. We thank you, and Godspeed, sir. Thank you very much for coming, ladies and gentlemen.
At the press conference immediately after the speech, an obvious question. Why did you come to Penn State?
They're friends, and you like to visit friends. I mean, they've got the program that I refer to, Share, and we want to be able to express our appreciation for what they're doing, which is a very important contribution to our struggle. And I mean, we want to say to them, when the history of South Africa is written, Penn State will be mentioned in dispatches.
Sir, Bishop Tutu, after nearly a year of the Bush administration, what changes do you see in American policy towards South Africa, for good or for ill?
I would say that having met both President Reagan and President Bush, I would much rather deal with Mr. Bush I think, that he appears to have a heart and seems to care. When constructive engagement was announced, I refused to see the American ambassador in South Africa as my small protest against constructive engagement because of what I have seen appearing to happen. I have changed that. I've met with Mr. Swing. There are some things that are happening. I think Hank Cohen is more aware of the realities than his predecessor, Chester Crocker, that they do admit that sanctions can work. And even rhetoric, the right kind of rhetoric, is important. And we've heard slightly different things from this administration than the things we heard from the Reagan administration. I am unhappy, and I have said so. I'm quite unhappy about the policies of this administration with regard to Angola, the support for UNITA. I think it is immoral, just as much as I believe that the administration's policies in Nicaragua are immoral. And I have said, if you behave towards South Africa as you behave towards Nicaragua, apartheid would have ended yesterday.
And a question for the university community. Is there more the university can do to end apartheid?
First of all, I want to doff my hat to university students because they, more than other people, helped to change the moral climate in this country, to the extent that where sanctions were totally unacceptable because of what students and other people did. You not only got sanctions approved by Congress, but you even had a veto override of a presidential attempt at stopping them. And I would say that students are just great. I think, that they ought to be moving even more, as it were, to the fore in making it as impossible for an American administration to collaborate with apartheid as it would be to collaborate, say, with Nazism. And I think, that young people have the kind of idealism, I've spoken about it, which would make this possible. And I've always made a distinction, even under the Reagan administration. One made the distinction between the administration and the American people. And I think, that by and large, the American people would like to see apartheid removed as a scourge from the face of the earth. And young people have a tremendous role. I have to be restrained and hope, that people will have the capacity to change. And I think, it's happened here, that people have begun to understand that, for instance, the Sullivan Code, as it was then, would do nothing to remove apartheid. They were doing sort of peripheral adjustments. But I am committed to a non-violent ending of apartheid, and I believe, that sanctions, economic pressure, are a non-violent strategy that has shown it can work.
A copy of the program you've just seen can be purchased through Penn State Media Sales at mediasales.psu.edu or by calling 800-770-2111.